classical music composer by training, Samson Young is a rising star in the art world with a fresh multimedia approach to contemporary art.
He is a very versatile and erudite and articulate person. When you're talking to him, it's very easy to get enraptured by his ideas, by his perspective, and by his astounding knowledge.
At the heart of Samson Young's practice is the interweaving of image and sound. His works traverse live performance, videos, and sound drawings.
Samson stands out as an artist because of his interdisciplinary approach. He's someone who has found a way to explore beyond music into sound, and then he's found a way to combine that with his interest in visual art.
Feels a bit like an old bird being caught between these two disciplines. This makes his work very unconventional.
The way that he's able to DJ different fields, whether it's sort of sonic or audio, whether it's a visual sphere, he's able to kind of seamlessly work with all of these.
If art has any role to play, if art can do anything, then art is really good at one thing, which is enriching the imagination.
Samson Young lives and works in Hong Kong. Based in the Hong Kong Media Art School, where he teaches, Samson's office is where most of his intriguing works are born.
So this is my really tiny workspace. I think if you look around and look at my desk, it pretty much sums up the three main things that I do. A third of my time is spent on researching the subject matter and listening to things and actually writing. Another 1/3 of time is usually spent on sound drawings of different kind, representations of sound. The other third of how my time is spent is working on technology. So a couple of things that I'm working on right now, for example, this is actually like, this is actually a bangle that you can wear on your arm that wirelessly transmit not only like how your arm is moving, but like how you are tensing your muscle and also your hand gesture.
Samson's studio mirrors his wide-ranging interests, but his love of experimentation may seem surprising for someone who underwent a formal education in classical music composition. Although born in Hong Kong, Samson's formative years were spent in Australia before he furthered his studies in America.
It wasn't until I was in Australia when I started really exploring the musical side of myself. I remember having this urge to learn a whole bunch of other instruments as well. It was kind of like like music cram school or something. I don't know, like it was fun actually.
But Samson's artistic journey took a new turn when he did his PhD in music composition at Princeton.
There were all kinds of very strange people doing all kinds of very strange things. And my supervisor was just, he didn't really care what I did, you know. He was, oh, you're making a video in it, and you're ping pong with like somebody with a cello and in a Teletubby costume. Yeah, that's great, go do it, you know. I think it was a time when all these different interests of mine just came together. That was an inspiration for me.
From that point on, Samson's works took on a new direction. With his spirit of experimentation, he began to venture into interactive performances.
Works that has to do with sort of me trying to test out an idea. Sometimes they involve the public.
In 2013, Samson recruited 70 people for a work that is based on a particular chord from Richard Wagner's opera entitled Tristan and Isolde.
It's a very famous moment at the beginning of an opera by Wagner, and it's an important chord in music history because it represents this watershed moment in which the, I guess, traditional notions of tonality broke down.
Each participant was asked to invent Cantonese phrases that mapped perfectly onto the Tristan chord.
People who speak Cantonese, we have a really great way of memorizing things because Cantonese has 9 tonal inflections.
His participants were asked to internalize the phrase by singing it several times in front of the camera.
So people sang it to the camera up to 7, 8 times. And some of the lyrics that they came up with were really funny. Like somebody said something about sort of like soldering iron. There were some texts that were very political, actually. Like it becomes almost Freudian. People just like sang about what they were thinking at the time. It becomes really personal. Of course, at the end, I ended up with all of these songs, a whole database of them. But I guess the work is actually in people's head, like the fact that I have planted these earworms in them, because now that they have come up with random lyrics to this really important moment in the, in this opera, the next time if they go and see this opera, or if they hear a recording of this opera, they might burst out laughing because they remember there's random bits of text that they have come up with. So even for a very brief moment, temporarily, I might have corrupted the opera for them. And sort of they might have invented their own little localization or personalization of this otherwise very canonic opera. That's the point of the work, really.
Samson's playful dig at the elitism of classical music is a strong theme of his early works, like Laptop Orchestra and iPhone Orchestra. With technology, these performances invite anyone without musical training to play.
It started out from the very simple question about orchestras. An orchestra is formed of stereotypes like politics of playing, who's the first string or who plays the percussions or come into the forefront. And for Samson, looking at it is also a kind of interesting way about what if he forms an orchestra? How does that come into play?
All art is a form of sort of experimentation at the end of the day. So if you're not willing to take that leap and experiment with something new, then you may not end up with some new result. He's willing to take those kind of challenges and be open to where it may take him.
After the break, Samson takes this game of experimentation to the streets. Hong Kong artist and composer Samson Young is highly regarded for his crossover between experimental music, sound, and contemporary art. Samson devotes long hours into fieldwork, in-depth research, and understanding the history of places.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a very important conversation to be had about history through the sense of hearing.
Samson's auditory approach was central to one of his breakthrough works, Liquid Borders. The project commenced in 2012 when the Hong Kong government announced their plans to open the borders between Hong Kong and mainland China.
When I started the project, there was a lot of debate and anxiety surrounding the border. I started systematically walking the border, and I stuck contact microphones on the border fences, and I picked up the vibration of the fences. And I ended up with this whole archive of border fences recording. I really had no idea what the fences would sound like. I guess I have an idea that it's going to be very noisy, like it's going to be abstract, but I didn't expect it to be, like, for example, so low. I didn't expect it to sound like a train. There were some very interesting shapes and forms that triggered the imagination.
And these then became kind of departure points for making drawings.
I presented with maps, photographs, official permits and documents that I had received from the government to go in these frontier-closed areas. The graphical scores, the graphical notation of the sound, with the sound sort of playing back on devices underneath the score. It's actually the first time I had shown these sort of scores as drawings. And so in a way that piece was quite important to me because it started this whole line of work that I do now, which are sort of sound drawings of different things. My sound drawings are transcriptions, they are not scores. I mean, the difference being that a score is something that you make before a sound happens, but a transcription is something that exists after the sound, so you transcribe the sound.
Liquid Borders also marked the start of Samson's exploration beyond the music world into bigger themes.
So to me, it's a very powerful work. It's the first time he's exploring question of territories.
Fencing stop movement of people. So what does it stop? What doesn't it stop? Like if you think about it, things like ideology, they are things that the border fences don't really stop. They're kind of like wind, I guess. They come right through the fence. And also I really like the fact that if you put a piece of microphone on the border fences, it doesn't really matter whether you're putting the microphone on this side of the fence or the other side of the fence, you're picking up the same sound. And I like that as a metaphor.
A lot of his work comes from this kind of research-based practice, which drives deep into the subject, so it kind of opens up for interpretation.
To Samson, art is not about swaying opinions, but an internal journey of figuring out complex issues. He also extends this journey to his audience by means of multimedia walks. Commissioned for Hong Kong Art Basel in 2016, Samson designed a 60-minute walk entitled So You Are Old by the Time You Reach the Island.
The people who participated, they have a whole kit with them. They had a tote bag, various objects inside, binoculars, there's a radio, there's a map, there's a booklet. That gives you sort of like background information about the walk.
Tuning in to Samson's fictional film, the participants visit key locations as the narrative unfolds. Along the way, they experience pre-recorded sounds, live actions and performances that had been orchestrated by Samson. And a surprise awaits as they arrive at the last stop.
As you're watching the film, some performers actually approach you from behind you and they start to sing to you. And the performers, they look like they're other walkers, so you wouldn't know at first.
Samson himself plays the main character of the fictional film, and he appears in person to the participants at the end of their journey.
After the whole performance has finished, you're given a phone number to call, and that phone number actually connects you to my phone, and I'm standing up there on the bridge and I sing a song to you. So there are maybe some 100 or 120 participants, and I sang to every one of them.
You know, suddenly you've got Samson's voice in your ears, and I think we were all overcome with emotion towards the end of it.
The location of the multimedia walk contributed to the participants' emotional response. It was along the site of the Umbrella Revolution, a protest demanding greater democracy from China in 2014.
The sites that we were walking through has a lot of different meaning for people, particularly for people who participated in the umbrella movement. All of those places are people would remember as being very personal. So I think it just like the emotional aspect of it was kind of unconscious.
I think even if you're not from Hong Kong, it's something that can resonate with many people. Also, the way that he's able to look at the past as not something that's static, as something that's dead, but draw on that and make it relive in a different kind of time-space continuum.
Coming up, Samson brings us behind the scenes of his latest art show. Contemporary artist Samson Young has created thought-provoking works that are relevant not just to Hong Kong, but also to the rest of the world. In recent years, his works are progressively moving onto the global stage. Nocturne, an unconventional endurance performance, was Samson's debut solo show in New York, in which he uses household objects to perform sounds of explosions and juxtaposes them against muted real-life night bombing footage.
Like lightly tapping on a drum, a fan blowing some rice paper, I'm dropping dirt on a mic. So it's all very soft. But then through the computer and through the FM radio broadcast, they sound really loud and they sound like explosion sounds.
Samson challenges the audience to think about the sanitized way we experience explosion sounds through the media.
The sounds of war were very much colored by the cinema, by Hollywood, which of course is not a realistic depiction of how it sounds, like a spectator sport almost. The whole project has to do with thinking about warfare and how we romanticize warfare.
I would call what Samson does a kind of poetic politics. It's not politics in your face, but there's a kind of poetry in the way that he's able to address these very political issues or these very political moments in time.
Back in his studio, Samson is preparing for another upcoming endurance performance entitled Canon.
So I'm working on a whole bunch of bird sound drawings.
Canon comprises of a series of sound drawings and a sound performance inspired by the motif of birds.
Oh, these are bird whistles. So these are actually what I'm going to be performing with. So each one of them comes with a different pitch. Like for example, this one is a Japanese nightingale. The way you do it is you put one of these in your mouth and you wet them for a minute. Then you wet it for a minute, and when it's soft enough, then you can start to whistle with it. It's pretty good, huh? The most beautiful bird songs could come from birds that are potentially regarded as pests by us. So we create sort of instruments that would emit calls of birds in distress to sort of scare birds away. And I find that interesting.
Canon is a piece commissioned for Art Basel, Switzerland, a meeting point for the international art world. The work consists of two parts: a viewing station that is made to resemble a bird cage, and his live performance that can be heard throughout the exhibition hall. The title, Canon, refers to these bird scarers, long-range acoustic devices used to repel pest birds and also to disperse crowds in protest situations.
But the use of it is highly problematic because at maximum volume, these devices could induce permanent hearing loss and damage.
Performing in a police uniform, Samson juxtaposes the exuberant bird songs with brute power.
I will be whistling these bird songs with the LRAD unit and projecting the performance over a long distance to the audience on the other end of the space.
Upon entering the hall, the audience can hear the projected bird sounds that seem to emerge out of nowhere. Many of them were only able to locate the source when they came to the scissor lift.
I guess the impact, and also for people to think about the way sound has traveled and how that is a metaphor for, so many different things.
That really impressed me. Like, I wouldn't have thought of sound to be a weapon.
It makes not only comfortable feelings. I know I don't like it, but I think it's good.
I like it. I think it's interesting. Makes you think about different things. And, this machine, it's used against people, and the sound of the birds is kind of peaceful, so that gives a nice contrast.
Through this work, Samson also uses birds as a metaphor to reflect about the concept of migration.
It's a very dangerous business to be migrating from one continent to another. Sometimes it's out of desire, I guess, but sometimes it's out of necessity. They just need to find food, or because the weather is getting cold. And I think that's something to think about, like mobility of people, how we welcome some and not others. And birdsong is a good way to think about all of those things, yeah.
Art is Samson's way of thinking deeper into complex issues. But while his works expand into diverse forms and mediums, music composition remains at the core of his practice.
Although I do many different things, I still essentially think of myself as a composer, in that even when I'm drawing, I'm thinking musical and compositional terms. Like that's how I structure the world. That's how I sort of arrange things. But I would do them not necessarily in the concert hall, but maybe in the contemporary art context.
I mean, to me, that's what makes really great artists, is when you can look at their practice and see the interlaced relationships across all these different works, which may not appear to be connected on the surface, but underneath there's a sort of foundation of thinking there. And I think Samson's one of the artists who has that in his practice.
I think people are really hungry for artists who are able to kind of transverse all of these different disciplines, because it's still extremely conservative. We talk about art, but everyone works in their silos, and it's very rare that you have an artist that is able to bridge these different fields of practice.
My work is always changing. It has gone through several major shifts already in the past decade or so, I think. But I'll definitely continue to be making art because it's what I'm good at and I enjoy doing it. So I think that's the best reason for it, really.